my calculations are correct, when this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious
It has begun!
Calm down, Doctor. Now is not the time for fear.
Trying to misbehave.
Give them nothing, but take from them everything!
Program complete. Enter when ready.
Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to another Geek News Movie Night, where we take a film, we analyze the good, the bad, and everything in between. I am your host, Adam Mickelson, aka Drac. I hope everybody's having an awesome day or night when you're listening to this. And joining me is, once again, out of the shadows, the Shadow Blazer himself. Alex, did you conjure up the lizard we're about to talk about today?
Can neither confirm nor deny that.
So that basically means yes.
I will neither confirm nor deny.
If Fazbear Entertainment has taught me anything, neither confirm nor deny pretty much confirms.
Yep.
All right, and today we are taking on Godzilla Minus One. So I've actually gotten a little bit of beef here, Alex, because I personally wanted to tackle this one before the Godzilla vs. Kong sequel that came out. I don't want to say they came out around the same time, but I think they came out in the same year, roughly. And I'll tell you the main reason that I did, and you can tell me whether or not I'm absolutely insane for doing so, but since this is supposed to be a Toho incarnation of Godzilla,
Right.
I wanted to see, considering now that we have the legendary version, just what Toho would do in response to the legendary universe that's being done. And the fact that they went back to the basics, I actually think probably was a good idea for them. So they basically, with Minus One, tried to, at least in my interpretation, if you see this otherwise, Alex, feel free to say so, they basically went back to the original story. They went back to like the 40s, the 50s, and kind of tried to do that iteration of Godzilla once again. Am I wrong in that at all?
I'd agree. I feel like it definitely invokes more of the original 54 film.
Yes, and since, Toho beat a granddaddy that started up the monster movies that we know and love, I wanted to see what they were going to do in response to the legendary monsterverse that is being created, because, I already know where the monsterverse is going because I've seen a lot of those movies. But I wanted to see what Minus One was going to be able to pull off. What were you thinking walking into Godzilla Minus One, Alex?
I knew a few things about the movie, not a tremendous amount, but I had been hearing a lot of the positive buzz about it. So I guess I just kind of expected, okay, it's going to be another pretty solid, probably another very dramatic Godzilla movie. And I had seen some of the maybe I hadn't seen any previews, but I think I'd seen some clips. But yeah, I kind of figured, okay, we're still kind of sticking on with the more serious Godzilla films. This is obviously we're post
Shin
Godzilla, which was again serious.
I never saw a trailer. I saw the announcement for it, but I never saw a release date. I never saw a trailer. I knew that it was going to be a Japanese cast because they were basically going to try to. I don't think this is meant to be restarting their Godzilla continuity, but I knew that they were going to go back to basics for it. And that was after hearing that they were going to do Godzilla Minus One, I heard nothing on this. It was actually difficult to be able to find anything on it. The only way that I knew that it was out, I shit you not, was when our buddy in the chat, Kasaibo, started to have arguments with people on Twitterman X that there were two kinds of arguments. One, that Minus One was inferior to the legendary Monsterverse and what they were doing, or we were all a bunch of stupid poopy heads for watching any of it, because it's obviously not good cinema. I shit you not, I saw the same kinds of Pacific Rim-esque arguments being made about anybody who watched Godzilla Minus One or any of the legendary MonsterVerse movies, which is, it's just stupid to me as far as I'm concerned. Because as far as I'm concerned, you know, this is again my interpretation, good cinema is what an individual takes out of it. And for me, I've always been a Godzilla fan, so I was going to watch this shit. And I was probably going to enjoy it. I mean, I went out of my way to go watch Shin Godzilla when that actually hit theaters, and that wasn't even likely to happen for a lot of speculation, and then we got to see Shin Godzilla in the theaters. So at that point, it's just like, I'm a Godzilla fan. I'm going to see it. I don't care that, you know, if it's going to have the limited theatrical release, all the better, because that makes a monster movie better, is being able to see it on the big screen. So that being said, like we said before, I tried to look for a really short synopsis on the film, like that just basically describes it. And unfortunately, the shortest I've been able to find is with IMDb. So let me go ahead and go over this really quick to bring people up to speed on what we are talking about. Feeling as if he unfairly cheated death too many times, Shikishima, a surviving kamikaze pilot, is attacked on Odo Island, along with many warplane engineers, by a gargantuan monster. After the engineers die because of Shikishima's failing to distract the monster, an overwhelming amount of guilt weighs upon him, especially after a homeless woman and a baby move into his home when he returns. Shikishima, now on a personal mission, teams up with a large group of veterans to finally take down the monster known as Godzilla. I'm sorry, Godzilla. I love it. That's like the only thing that's come out of the Roland Emmerich Godzilla one, is that we finally got to have some Japanese guy on the screen going Godzilla.
Yeah.
So at that point, already I have a feeling that some people are gonna have. If you watched our Godzilla 2014 review, because we both did one. One of the main complaints that we had about 2014 was that it was based more around a human cast. Specifically, it was based around a father and a son. And we had a lot of issues with that. However, I don't think the same complaint can be made here. What do you think?
I wouldn't say it's the same problem for me.
No.
And even then, my problem was less that there were more about the humans cast in the Gareth Edwards Godzilla. It's just that the characters themselves weren't very interesting.
Right. Because, I mean, crap, his name fails. His name escapes me, but he played the dad.
Bryan Cranston?
Yeah, Bryan Cranston, thank you. I kept on going like through the various Bryans that I know in celebrities, and I couldn't get the right one. Bryan Cranston's character was probably the most interesting, but that's not saying a whole lot, because the main reason that he was interesting was the fact that he had lost his wife to the nuclear meltdown that eventually, quote, created Godzilla. Although if you watch the later movies, there's some speculation that maybe that's not the case, that it's not Godzilla, so to speak. It was just, it created one of the Mutos, basically.
Right.
And so you had that investment, and then you also had him kind of going off into conspiracy theories and whatnot because of the fact he lost his wife. I think our main issue is that the dad wasn't necessarily followed too much. It was the son, and it was his wife. And they had done virtually nothing with the wife, and close to nothing with the son. So at that point, that's where our problem was, is that there wasn't a whole lot to latch onto. There was much more with Cranston's character than anything else.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm trying to think, did Ken Watanabe show up in 2014, or did he show up later?
He was definitely in the movie. He might have been a bit later, though.
So they were already establishing his character, and he was interesting because they were setting up the mystique of Monarch, and trying to get people associated with that. And again, that was ultimately the problem that happened, is that the characters that we were supposed to be, quote, following, we didn't give two shits about. Whereas in this film, Shikishima is the focus.
Agreed, 100%.
Okay. Yeah. So, and that's why we're saying that this is kind of like recreating the 1950s Godzilla, because it's not necessarily, Godzilla is considered the natural disaster in the film. Instead, I can't remember who you follow in the 50s. I think it was just a scientist. But you follow
Quite
the
a few
scientist.
characters in the there were quite a few characters in the 54 film, but I don't 100%.
But they
know all
gave
their
us
names either.
premise and grounds to be able to follow them at least a little bit,
Mhm.
and then you would have the Godzilla stuff happening in the middle of that. That's the same premise here, is that you have grounded characters that you can get invested in, and then when the monster attacks, we actually give a shit that, the monster's attacking in the area that they're at. So that being said, and once again, it's a Toho, not because everything I've read on this is not a restart of the Godzilla mythos. It's basically just kind of like Shin, where it's its own continuity. They're experimenting with the Godzilla formula to see what they can do. Because everything that I've read on this is that it's not going to have continuations or anything like that. It is just testing the waters to see what they can do. And also, somebody was saying that it might have been celebrating an anniversary for Godzilla, probably like the 50s film or something like that, but that was about it. Because the 50s film, I think, came out like a couple of years before it did in America. So maybe the
originally
75th?
54,
So at that point, maybe like the 75th anniversary or something like that. I don't know. So so now that we've kind of explained going into this what our thoughts were on the matter, let's get into the positives of it. What did you like about Godzilla Minus One, Alex?
Well, definitely again, because like we've been talking about with comparing this to Gareth Edwards' 2014 Godzilla, it's again I think showing you how you could take primarily a human cast and kind of make the monster a little more of an omnipresent force instead.
Yes.
Right? So long as you have the characters that are interesting, and I think the characters are interesting in this. You have a kamikaze pilot who basically is considered dishonorable because he failed to do his objective. He didn't finish his mission.
Well, he failed two objectives ultimately, because he failed to do his one objective, which was as a kamikaze pilot, but then he also failed in saving the engineers on the island that he retreated to when Godzilla attacked.
Yeah, so you can see why he's kind of like the pariah. He lost and he presumably lost his family, his parents in the war.
Yep.
And so he's kind of got nothing left. But then, of course, what happens? This strange girl and this little child stumble into his life. And, well, suddenly he's kind of torn between, no, these are just strangers I'm just helping out because I should help them out, versus they want to become my family, even though he's kind of growing close to them, but he keeps wanting to push them away.
Yeah.
And I like that aspect.
I liked it too, honestly, because, you had this double failure in his life that, I mean, most of the time, the only one he ever got criticized for was the fact that he was a kamikaze pilot and he didn't fulfill his mission. But then you had moments later on in the film where you got to see the gravity of the second consequence that he had, specifically when he reunites with the sole surviving engineer of that island, and how you get to see their history because of the damnation that he basically committed all of his friends to, by not doing anything about this monster that came out of nowhere. So a lot of the film is Shikishima punishing himself internally, and then circumstance just kind of wraps itself around him. So he ends up with the girl and the baby, and like, who are basically also survivors, because I can't remember how long they said, but Hiroshima and Nagasaki had happened during the timeline of this film, and they were refugees from those bombings. So at that point, they were basically all just a family of refugees together trying to survive. And then you also had like the neighbors who were also trying to survive and trying to pick up the pieces of their life after these horrific events had happened. And so I tend to agree with you. The fact that Shikishima and all of the people that kind of shape around him are more of the focus of this, and Godzilla shows up, he just shows up like 4 times total, I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, they make it count when he does.
Mm-hmm. I will give a positive. So you went in the human aspect. I will bounce a little bit into the Godzilla aspect of it, because I actually liked at the beginning, we weren't dealing with a gargantuan mega kaiju lizard. Because in that initial attack that we keep talking about, I mean, he was big, don't get me wrong, but he was only about as big as, like, if you put probably 3 of those Japanese Zeros, like nose to nose in the air, he's probably about that tall. He's not huge at this given moment. He's not like skyscraper big, but so it kind of feels like, oh, we're dealing with like a baby kaiju, but it's really more just like, okay, he now just barely exists. This is probably like Godzilla in infancy to adolescent kind of timeline. And I love the fact that they did that, because he wasn't as big of a threat, but he gets bigger as the movie goes on. Because I think by second or third appearance, he was about the size that we expected. And that, yeah, I want to say by the third one, where he actually shows up in Tokyo. Because the one where they're underwater, he's still not as big yet, but he's getting there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that they decided to do that, and not just say, like, because you go back to the 1950s stuff or any kind of Godzilla origin, he's there. You know, he's the big kaiju that we all know. And instead they're basically saying, like, no, he's kind of in a mid-transition. And so it's easily conceivable that in those early stages, he was probably a lot more killable than he is near the end of the film. I have some arguments on that, but I'll get there when we get there. Any other positives that you want to put in there, Alex?
The supporting cast is great. You know, the people that, especially the ones that want to find a way to stop Godzilla. You know, you got like the scientist guy, and you got all the people from the tugboat that tried to go find a way to stop Godzilla. I like the whole cast.
Mm-hmm. I especially like the, I can't remember her actual name, and I feel bad for it, but the girl that we keep referencing, because eventually, like, she, like, up until that point, she had heard the story of what Shikishima had dealt with, and then Godzilla attacks Tokyo, and she's in it's not a monorail by any stretch, but it's basically like a public train kind of transportation, and she gets to look out the window and go, oh, giant lizard. Well, now we're effed. And we actually get to see kind of her quote last moments in that moment, because I think she's pretty close to when he fires off his beam the first time in Tokyo. And ultimately, because we are going to go spoiler heavy into this, I don't see how we couldn't. We eventually found out that she does survive. Like, through some fluke. The best way I know how to explain it is, I'd like to call it boomer syndrome. That's going to sound really mean, but let me explain for a second, because I could already feel Alex giggling. You remember in Independence Day, and we even gave shit in this when we reviewed it, the dog Boomer, who literally ran across an entire freeway of cars as the plasma bomb had hit, and just barely, by this, like, the tiniest bits of hair on its tail, it makes it into the alcove, the maintenance area that they were able to get into to hide from the plasma bomb. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, I remember.
Yeah. This is why I call it boomer syndrome, is that it's like, there's no way you could possibly explain it, but hey, it happened.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what happened here with her. I want to say her name was Oishi or something like that, but she ultimately survives somehow. I don't even think the movie explains how she survived, but she survived. And so not everything is end of the world for Shikishima. He does get some positives out of it, kind of thing. That's kind of my viewpoint on it. And that actually kind of goes into one of the positives that I have, is that Shikishima is supposed to, like, I'm not saying that you're supposed to look down on him or anything like that. He's had a rough life in regards to these events. But the problem is that anytime for a majority of this movie, anytime Godzilla gets involved, his answer to atoning for what he did on the island is always involving him dying and basically going out or going out in a blaze of glory to take the monster down. And one of the things I actually like at the end is, they have that final mission where he is basically planning on flying a Japanese Zero, or no, it wasn't a Zero, it was a prototype plane. He's going to fly it into the mouth of Godzilla with, I don't think it was a nuke, but it was a really high yield explosive, and blow him up from the inside. And then near the end of it, even though he told the engineer, this is going to be my atonement for what I was supposed to do on the island, he still makes him like that ejector seat and actually does tell him about it, and then immediately says, like, if you die, then you can't truly atone for what you did. You have to live on. You have to live each day and continue to do that. It's kind of the Kenshin response to things, is like, dying is the easy road out. And instead, if you want to do a road to redemption, you have to take the long way around. And by doing that, by actually choosing to do so, that's when we find out that the girl is alive, and the kid might actually be able to be cared for by both of them, and things actually might turn out to be okay in the end. Whereas, like, Shikishima's plan for a majority of the movie is just like, if I see this thing ever again, I'm going to take it down with me, basically. So I like the fact that they still kind of had that optimistic ending at the end of it, despite how dark some of those scenes for him would get.
Yeah, I agree.
I liked a lot of that, especially when the engineer returns into the picture. It's actually some of the best stuff as far as I'm concerned. Any other positives that you want to add to this?
I just want to also echo on the whole, accepting life over death, and why that's such a message in the movie. I liked that a lot. Considering, again, the whole premise is centered around a former kamikaze pilot, where their whole mission was to die for the emperor, die for the country, die for war. And the whole movie takes that idea, takes that theme, because that's what kind of soldier he was, and says, no, you don't have to throw your life away. And you can live, and you can survive, and you can take these people as your new family.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree with it. I actually loved a lot of the implications, because it wasn't just the engineer that was doing it. The neighbor woman who would take the kid in, she was actually kind of pushing that too, which is funny because she was one of the people that actually punished him societally wise, when she found out that he hadn't committed kamikaze. So I like the fact that she was one of the people that was basically saying that. Even the two military men that he works with for a good portion of the movie, they were also kind of saying, like, you've got a good life here. You shouldn't want to just leave it, just because of your vendetta or whatever it might be. And I actually think vendetta is kind of an appropriate word, because in a way, Godzilla kind of becomes this guy's white whale, so to speak. Like, it really just kind of becomes this, I can only die if it is at Godzilla's hands. And that just, it speaks such volumes to me, because the thing that was supposed to kill him ultimately doesn't kill him, and ultimately he doesn't want to die in the means of that. I don't really have any other positives here. Do you have any others?
It's just always nice when they call back the old Godzilla themes. The way or
the original score coming up when they launched their attack. That was actually pretty freaking awesome to be able to have a new orchestral score of the original Godzilla theme.
Yeah,
because I remember people actually saying, like, well, the orchestra thing during that battle was so stupid. You should have had some heavy metal or something. I'm like, dude, it's the original Godzilla theme that's been on, like, all of them. I don't know why you would think that that's bad.
Yeah.
So
I like it. It's a nice callback.
yeah. So going into negatives, are there any negatives that we want to point out with Godzilla Minus One?
That's tough. I don't think there's a lot that really weigh the movie down. Even I can even buy Noriko Oishi's miraculous survival because they're definitely hinting at something bigger is amiss with her now.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't really think of two.
They
Okay, I got
do.
one. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yes.
We found
As a matter of
that
fact,
out.
okay. I guess my negative, and it's, I don't know if you can call this that big of a negative. It's just more like I'm a little surprised they didn't have more of an American presence, considering this is right after World War II. So America would have still been occupying Japan by this point, and they just kind of brushed the whole American occupation to the side.
Yeah.
So,
I kind of brushed it off just because, like, when I thought about the World War II occupation, I would have thought it would have been more prevalent in like metropolitan areas, not necessarily in the coastal kind of area that they were living in. But that
they were
was
still
me.
like they still were like in Tokyo and like Chiba, or at least close enough to it. So
Because they were supposed to be like off the coast, or not off the coast, but like in the coastal kind of outside city area, where a lot of wreckage
kind of more
was.
rural, you think? Yeah, you could be right, but I
Mhm.
would still think you'd with a giant
I wouldn't-
monster bearing down.
I
you'd
wouldn't
think
say it was I wouldn't say it
would.
was rural, but like this doesn't really exist in Japan, but like kind of suburb kind of deal. Because it wasn't really farmland. It was fishing territory. That part was
Right.
evident, but um
Mhm.
a lot of the area that they kind of show is just like neighborhoods. So
Yeah.
that was me though. Um so here's the part that also might upset fellow Godzilla fans when I say this, but this was a big complaint that I even mentioned when we recorded or when we watched the film. I love Godzilla, but one of the reasons that I love Godzilla, Alex, is because of all of the various monster battles that we can have in the Godzilla universe. You know, we have Godzilla versus Mothra, we can have Godzilla versus Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla, stuff like that. And so I'm not saying that I don't like the originals. I do. I love them as disaster film pieces and everything like that. But when I think of Godzilla, there are a couple of factors that have to be there. And this film decided to add a feature or an ability to Godzilla that I think they are going to regret if this continues on. And that is regeneration. Specifically, super-powered regeneration. What I mean by that is if people have seen the film, there is a point where they basically fire off, I want to say it was like a napalm missile or something like that, right on the face of Godzilla. And almost immediately, like we're talking Full Metal Alchemist levels of regeneration here. Almost immediately, the skin is already recrafting itself while they are fighting. And to me, that is not something I want to see on a kaiju. Why? Because it's basically game over. Nobody wins in that regard because it doesn't matter how hard you hit it, it's going to regenerate. And you're going to have to find a way past the regeneration, which is already a difficult thing in and of itself. And what's even more frustrating for me is, like I said, I like the monster battles and whatnot. So if they technically continued with this Godzilla, he could never lose.
Right.
But the whole premise of having Godzilla go up against something like Mechagodzilla is for him to lose, be able to adapt, and then come back and kick its ass, right? But if you fire a laser at its face and it just reforms its face, it's not necessarily that big of a challenge anymore. It's basically Godzilla with God mode, for lack of a better term, and thus loses a lot of that luster to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it also hurts as kind of a natural disaster kind of thing because I have to sit here and look at it and go, how do you overcome that? Because there's no way, like even the stuff that they tried to do in the film to counter its regeneration didn't work. So at that point, how do you counter that? It becomes the impossible to defeat natural disaster. If Godzilla comes to your shore, you're done. Is ultimately what this film kind of teaches, and I don't like that. I like regeneration on a kaiju. I don't like the premise of it whatsoever. If you want to have somebody like Ghidorah have it, and then Godzilla can overcome the regeneration, I'm on board with that part. I'm on board with that because they'll find a way to be able to do it. But this was Godzilla versus humans, and human technology specifically that was in the 1940s, 1950s. In other words, Japan didn't have nukes. So
Japan still doesn't have nukes. So
Japan still doesn't have nukes. So how do you beat that then? You know?
Oh.
That becomes the big problem. So that was like one of my biggest issues with it. Did it detract too much from the film? Not so much. But if they did another film, I would really want them to cut that back. Because otherwise it's not an interesting, compelling villain. It's an overpowered villain at that given moment.
All right.
Any other negatives that you want to mention there?
That's really kind of it, you know?
Okay.
Because I did thoroughly enjoy the movie. I don't have a lot of complaints with it.
Okay. So I actually do have some fun trivia for this film, so we can go ahead and get into that really quick. So fun fact, instead of creating a brand new roar for Godzilla Minus One, the crew simply played the original Godzilla roar over loudspeakers and recorded the audio. So we were actually kind of wondering this when we watched it, is that the Godzilla roar seemed kind of distorted. That's why. It was basically
cool.
Playback. They basically used audio playback to create, quote, create a new roar.
Clever. I like it.
I liked it, actually. So Minus One, it actually refers to the fact that Japan had already been devastated by World War II, brought down to zero, but with the emergence of Godzilla, it put Japan into the negative. This is reflected in the film's original Japanese tagline, which translates to post-war Japan from zero to minus.
I like it.
I actually like the terminology here when it came to that. This one made me giggle because I already knew this after we watched the film. Gareth Edwards, director of Godzilla 2014, he attended a screening of the film and described a feeling of jealousy while watching it, stating, "This is what a Godzilla movie should look like." Says the guy who made a Godzilla movie.
Yeah.
So, and here's the thing too, like visually, I don't have a whole lot of issues with the 2014 Godzilla film. I think they went out of their way to not show Godzilla, but I actually liked a lot of the visuals and a lot of the cinematography that happened in that film. It was pretty damn good. So for him to say that's surprising. According to Yamazaki, his Godzilla Yamazaki is the director of the film. His Godzilla would remain close to the themes of Ishiro Honda's original film, stating, "I love the original Godzilla, and I felt I should stay true to that spirit, addressing the issues of war and nuclear weapons." And super regeneration coming from nuclear weapons? I don't think that's one of the things that happens from that, but all right. I will say this, at least, you made a very compelling Godzilla ray, because I think it was this Godzilla that decided to do the basically making the laser that comes out of Godzilla's mouth kind of like a nuclear reactor, where all of the fins would go up in terms of like too much pressure, and then they have to expand the chamber to add more pressure. And so, yeah, because in the water, we actually saw this happen, like the dorsal fins going up, and then he would build up even more, and you'd hear the sound. I love that. I actually thought that was a really inventive way of showing the pressure building for Godzilla's breath. That was definitely awesome as far as I'm concerned. When asked about the differences between the American adaptations and the Japanese originals, Yamazaki stated that while the American Godzilla is only focused on being monstrous, the Japanese interpretation is both as a monster and as a god, commenting that the point of international Godzilla is that he's a really powerful monster, but a Japanese Godzilla is halfway a godlike creature in many ways. Not necessarily a religious god, but more like a Japanese god, a malevolent and destructive one. The fact that Godzilla is both a god and a monster is a point that should not be overlooked in the Japanese Godzilla. The Hollywood version of Godzilla leans forward and looks like a monster ready to fight. I don't know if I should say this myself, but I think Godzilla should be made in Japan. I can see his reasoning on that, but I think both are good. Because here's the thing, is like, I can see where you would want to consider these gods, but the Toho universe has already done that fairly well when it comes to the other monsters, not just Godzilla. So I honestly think that both interpretations are awesome. I wouldn't take away either of them. And in fact, I love the fact that the Legendary verse exists alongside a Toho verse now, so that we can get different interpretations of Godzilla. Just as much as I love the fact that Shin Godzilla exists. Like, the design itself of Shin Godzilla already just screams so many inventive ideas, specifically kind of going into the early 2000s Godzilla, and the fact that, you know, Godzilla's supposed to be this giant nuclear reactor, right? Well, giant nuclear reactors are unstable. And that's one of the things that I think of the most when it comes to Shin, is that Shin always felt like an unstable reactor, hence why we got like the multiple lasers coming out of the back, is it had to vent it somehow.
Right.
So I love the different interpretations, because it's just other ways that you can take this lizard monster and make it interesting. So those are all of the trivia, and unfortunately I don't have any clips for this, because a majority of the ones that are on and available are in Japanese dub. So at that point, unfortunately, I can't convey the subtitles to you, everybody. So at that point, I mean, I could have just kept the Godzilla roar, or just the typical sounds, but that's kind of not what people want to come here for when it comes to clips. You want the angry acting and the game over, man, game over.
We could mention visual effects winner at the Oscars.
Did it actually get visual effects?
Yes, it won.
Nice. All right. You know what? It deserved it, because a lot of the visual effects, especially a lot of the destruction in this, it put Emmerich to shame in a lot of ways, which is funny, because another movie that we watched while we were out there, while we were waiting for people to get ready for pools and whatnot, was Independence Day.
Yeah.
And so I was able to make that comparison in my head and go, Minus One just did like citywide damage better than Roland Emmerich did. That's very surprising to me. Now, one other thing that I actually want to get into, because this has actually been requested by not only Kasaibo, but a few others. I'm a diehard Godzilla fan, and so I would have to go into this, but it's going to be fun to do this with you anyway. Really quick, just kind of going into the overall design of Godzilla. I want to bring up like a good enough picture of this, but basically what we're going to do, Alex, we're going to rate the design compared to other stuff that has been done before. Okay, sorry, we had to take a quick break to take care of other things. But really quick, we're just really fast going to do what I'd like to call a Rate the Kaiju. I already know that if we ever do a Gundam-based series, we're going to have to do a Rate the Mecha, ultimately. So we'll do one really quick for Rate the Kaiju, which that actually didn't work out. What the hell? So here is some of the art that we actually do have for Godzilla from Minus One. And like I said, it doesn't change too much of the formula that makes Godzilla amazing. But it does try to add some unique new features to it to make it just as intimidating.
Yeah, I see him. I think it looks cool for this movie for sure.
I especially like the first one that I gave you, which basically tries to showcase the dorsal fins actually going up as kind of like this reactor path that's going to ultimately end at his mouth. So I thought that was actually a cool mechanical thing that they could do to make this design stand out. And in fact, I'll also show you this one, because this is actually from that scene. And ultimately just kind of shows that the end port is the mouth. And you can see the dorsal fins already all up. before it's ready to fire.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the design of this, and just as much as I like the legendary design that we have right now, even Shin Godzilla has an interesting design. It has a weird prototype design, but ultimately ends up into a dang good Godzilla design. So we've gone over the positives, the negatives, the trivia, and we've even rated the kaiju, Alex, but now it's finally time for us to say, out of 5, or if you want to do so, out of 10, what would you rate Godzilla Minus One?
Solid film for me. I give it a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, it's very difficult not to give this thing like a 4 or a 4.5 out of 5, because if you're specifically a fan of what the legendary universe was trying to do and have monsters fighting off against each other, this probably isn't going to work for you. But for most of the people that love the legendary monsterverse, they are also fans of like the original designs and the original films, and this is just paying homage to why those films are so amazing, and especially trying to tell new and unique stories around the concept of this giant monster trying to destroy all of Japan. So I love it. I honestly think it's a 4.5 out of 5. I can't really find too many things wrong, aside from my major complaint about the regeneration, which I think ultimately would harm it. It just depends on if the additional facts that we learned about basically kind of connecting over to Oishi, and I guess these are all like subtle references to Biollante as a villain, then maybe that would allow for a means for them to actually do a sequel to Minus One. Although I kind of still don't see how they could do it, just because the way that Yamazaki has talked about this in other interviews is it is a standalone film. He really wasn't looking to do anything. He just did those homages because he likes Biollante, or he likes the Biollante film. So, I mean, ultimately, if he gets a sequel, I'd still watch it. I'd have no problem doing so. I think it would be amazing. But that's just me. 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5. And I think that'll go ahead and wrap things up for this podcast of Godzilla Minus One. Alex, it has always been a pleasure to be able to watch these films with you, especially being able to watch some monster movie madness with you. But unfortunately, these are all the films that we did with just you and me. So what's going to have to happen for the next episode is me and Andrea tackled 2 films, and then we actually ended our vacation with the 3 of us watching 2 films as well. So the next film that you guys can look forward to is me and Andrea are going to be taking apart Spider-Man Far From Home, the continuation of the MCU. And we'll give our thoughts on that. But ultimately, you guys will see Alex again when we get around to the big films that we watched at the end, which were Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and Ghostbusters, The Frozen Empire. So you guys can look forward to that. In the meantime, though, Alex, if people want to reach out to you and tell you how much of a Godzilla fan you are not, how do they do so?
I'm on YouTube. Shadow Blizzard 3000 is my channel.
Seriously, we might have to borrow that hippo meme that Kasaibo keeps sending those people on Twitter Man X, just because we'll probably get a lot of people that are going to be making those claims, and we can just send that back to them.
Yeah.
I think that would be the perfect way to be able to handle it. I don't even know where he got it. It's just a hippo sitting on somebody. But it's the greatest way to be able to reply. And of course, if you guys are following this on YouTube, feel free to leave a like if you liked what we had to say. You could also feel free to subscribe and check out some of the other reviews that we've done. For example, we just barely did our reviews of Alien 3, as well as the Tetris movie. I cannot believe we actually did both Alien 3 and the Tetris movie, and our reactions to them in the ways that we did. So you guys might want to check those out. Honestly, you really ought to check them out. And then also, if you're listening on podcast formats, you can do so on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Player.fm, as well as Spotify. And we will catch you guys next time, or at least the Shadow Blazer will catch you guys the next time for the next movie that we did together. But we will see you guys next time for the next film, or Geek News Movie Night, of Spider-Man Far From Home. So until then, For Alex and for myself, we will see you guys next time.